In the heart of the sleepy village of Elmswood, nestled amongst dusty shelves in the old library, stood a clock unlike any other. It wasn't particularly grand, just a simple wooden case with a plain white face and elegant black hands, yet its silence was profound for generations. It hadn't moved, frozen at 10 minutes past 3. Mrs. Higgins, the ancient librarian, would sometimes tell wide-eyed children that it wasn't broken. It was waiting. It was the clock of lost souls, they whispered, though Mrs. Higgins preferred its gentler, truer name. The clock that only ticked when you were lost. Its stillness was a quiet comfort, a sign that all was well in the world, at least within the boundaries of Elmswood. Young Leo knew the clock intimately. He spent most afternoons tucked into a worn armchair near its alcove, escaping into adventure stories while his parents worked long hours at the mill. He felt a peculiar kinship with the silent timepiece, finding solace in its unwavering, quiet presence. One gray Tuesday, however, as rain lashed against the library windows and Leo felt a familiar ache of loneliness gnaw at his chest, a sound shattered the stillness. Tick. His head snapped up. Talk. There it was again. Impossibly clear. The long dormant second hand had jerked forward. Then again his heart pounded against his ribs as he watched it, mesmerized and suddenly chilled. It was moving, steadily, relentlessly. Who was lost? The clock's ticking became a constant, unsettling companion. In the following days Leo observed it with a mixture of dread and fascination. He noticed its rhythm changed, sometimes slow and ponderous, like footsteps dragging through mud, other times frantic and skittering, like a trapped bird. He tried asking Mrs. Higgins, but she merely smiled sadly, polishing her spectacles. It speaks for those who cannot find their way, dear boy, she murmured one afternoon as the clock ticked with a particularly heavy cadence. Sometimes the path vanishes right beneath our feet, even in familiar places. Leo looked around the familiar library, suddenly seeing the shadows deepen between the stacks. He realized, with a jolt, that the profound sense of displacement echoing in the tick-tock resonated deeply within his own quiet heart. He often felt adrift, unseen, driven by a desperate need to understand. Leo began a quiet investigation. He watched the villagers more closely. He saw the frantic ticking coincide perfectly with Farmer Jacob stumbling tearfully through the mist-shrouded woods at dawn, searching for a prized lost lamb. The clock slowed to a mournful beat when old Mr. Peterson sat staring blankly at his wife's empty chair in the bakery, his tea cooling untouched. One afternoon, the ticking stopped abruptly as little Maisie Green, who had wandered from the park in a daze, was scooped up into her frantic mother's arms right outside the library window. Leo gasped, the connection undeniable. The clock didn't measure hours. It measured the weight of being untethered, yet the clock's most persistent, haunting rhythm seemed reserved for Leo himself. On days when the loneliness felt like a physical weight pressing the air from his lungs, the ticking grew loudest, echoing in his ears even when he buried his head under his pillow at night. It was a constant reminder of his own invisible displacement. He felt lost in the crowded schoolyard, lost in his own quiet house, lost in the space between himself and his weary parents. The clock was his silent, sympathetic witness, its steady tick-tock a confirmation of his isolation that both comforted and chilled him. It understood his unspoken ache. Everything changed the day the storm hit. Rain fell in torrents, turning lanes into rivers and visibility to near zero. Leo was helping Mrs. Higgins secure a leaky window when a commotion erupted outside. Through the downpour, they saw Mrs. Bellamy, wild-eyed and soaked, screaming. Her daughter, Evie's name Evie, only 5, had vanished on the short walk home from the baker's. A cold dread seized Leo. Sharper than his own familiar loneliness, he looked at the clock. Its ticking was a furious, panicked drumroll, the second hand a blur. Without a word, Leo grabbed his worn coat and plunged into the tempest. He knew the village's hidden corners, the forgotten paths, the places a frightened child might seek shelter. Ignoring the stinging rain, Leo raced past the frantic search parties, guided by an instinct he couldn't explain, perhaps honed by his own experience of feeling unseen. He thought of the quiet nooks he loved, the spots where a small person might hide. He scrambled over a sodden fence, pushed through dripping hedges, and stumbled towards the old, hollow oak tree near the abandoned mill pond there. Huddled deep within the tree's dark cavity, shivering and sobbing, was Evie. Her pink raincoat was plastered to her tiny frame. "Evie," Leo called softly, his voice thick with relief. "It's Leo. The first found you." He carefully coaxed her out, wrapping his own coat around her, murmuring reassurances as he carried her back towards the lights and the shouts, her small arms clinging tightly to his neck. Returning to the library later, dripping wet and exhausted but glowing with a warmth he'd never known, Leo stopped before the clock. Mrs. Higgins stood beside him, a steaming cup of tea in her hands, her eyes bright. The library was quiet again, filled only with the soft rustle of pages and the comforting scent of old paper. The clock's hands were utterly still, frozen once more, but Leo saw it differently now. Its silence wasn't emptiness. It was profound peace. He understood the clock wasn't just a marker of despair, but a beacon calling for connection. By helping Evie find her way home, he had somehow found his own place too. He felt anchored, needed, visible. Mrs. Higgins placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You see, Leo," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "the greatest magic isn't in being found by others, it's in finding others when they are lost. That's how we truly find ourselves." Leo looked at the silent clock, then out at the rain-washed village, and smiled. He finally belonged, and the quiet clock stood as a gentle guardian, a reminder that while people might sometimes lose their way, they were never truly lost forever, not while kindness remained to guide them home.